What's going on, everybody? I don't exactly know why you'd want to be here or why you clicked on this video, but thanks for joining me on this sad ride, and welcome to my review of Screamboat. This film is about a group of people who are trapped on the Staten Island ferry with a murderous mouse who is inspired by the classic Walt Disney character Steamboat Willie. Well, I guess I shouldn't say inspired by, because that's not entirely accurate. You see, this character isn't based off of Steamboat Willie. This character is Steamboat Willie, thanks to good old-fashioned public domain copyright laws. So for anyone who doesn't know, when the copyright of an intellectual property expires, it then falls into what is known as public domain. There, it can be used, copied, and or adapted in any way someone likes without any restrictions or needed permissions. It is available to the public. So back in 2022, a little known property known as Winnie the Pooh fell into public domain, and with that, a new slasher subgenre was born with the release of the film Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. This would be the first of many slashers we would start to see released that were using and taking advantage of other notable IPs that had also fallen into public domain, specifically characters from classic children's cartoons. Quick correction to make here, I realized while I was editing this video that I had stated that Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey was the first of these copyright exploitation slasher movies, and that's not actually true, because the mean one, the slasher film involving the Grinch, who was actually made by a few of the same people that made Screamboat, was the first. It came out a few months prior, so really that movie was the first in this wave of these kind of slasher subgenre films. So I wanted to make that correction. It was not Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. It was in fact the mean one, but all my other points still stand. And on January 1st, 2024, the earliest iteration of Mickey Mouse, Steamboat Willie, fell into public domain, and almost immediately we saw a slew of slasher films get announced and slowly released over the course of the next year and a half using the iconic character, and we have many more on the way. Now, even with me being a massive slasher fan, it's my favorite subgenre of horror. It may even be my favorite subgenre of film. I have been very hesitant and resistant to check out a lot of these films because I find it hard to gauge what the filmmakers' motivations are behind making these movies, and so I cannot help but be cynical towards their existence. I find that with most of these films, it's pretty transparent what these filmmakers are doing. The intent is to shit out a generic slasher movie, drape it with a familiar property that will get people to be curious and come check out your film so that you can make a quick buck. To me, that is just lazy filmmaking and disrespectful to a genre that I care a lot about. And I know not all slashers are meant to be taken seriously, and there's a lot that can be forgiven within them. But when I can tell that you're clearly not in it for the right reasons, that's always going to turn me off towards your movie. So with all that being said, clearly going into this movie, I had super low expectations, and really to me, the best case scenario was going to be that I would be mildly entertained by a silly slasher movie. On the surface, the only thing this movie really had going for it is that David Howard Thornton is who is playing Steamboat Willie. You will all know him as Art the Clown. He was something I was actually genuinely interested in checking out in this film, but outside of that, I had no reason but to be skeptical about everything else. But before we get into the review, I'd like to ask that while you guys are here, go ahead and give the video a like and subscribe to the channel as well for more movie reviews. Make sure to get down in the comments below and tell me all your guys' thoughts and opinions on these copyright exploitation slasher movies we've been getting lately. I love to read anything you guys have to say. Now let's talk some Steamboat Willie. So starting with the positives, and unfortunately I just do not have a lot to say for this section of the review. This is definitely going to be more driven by the mixed and negative parts of the video. The only thing I can really say here is that in comparison to a lot of the other films that are made of this ilk, this one didn't feel like it was just a complete cash grab as much as a lot of the other ones have. Now obviously I have no way of 100% knowing that, and maybe I could just be a bit blinded by being a fan of David Howard Thornton's. I would like to think he wouldn't get involved with a movie that has such disingenuous intentions, but hey, I don't know the guy, so I can really only go strictly off of how I felt watching the movie, and so that's really the only compliment I can give this film, and I can't even give that compliment with much conviction. So we're going to go ahead and jump to the mixed and negatives, and for this video I'm going to combine these two sections because anything I even came remotely close to enjoying about this film would have something I did not like attached to it, and that's really why not much went into the positive section of this review, because I can't really say there was anything about this movie that I 100% enjoyed. Starting with the cast of characters we get here, some of them at best are enjoyable enough, but all of them are pretty cookie cutter generic archetypes of slasher survivors we've seen a gazillion times. No one really does anything to separate themselves from the rest, and so for a lot of them you either find yourself not caring or just being flat out annoyed by them. David Howard Thornton gives a fine performance as Steamboat Willie, but it did kind of just feel like Art the Clown in a mouse costume, and so I can't say it was anything that was overly impressive. And being that he wasn't really something I was worried about going into the film, his performance didn't necessarily exceed any expectations. But where this character really falls apart for me is in its execution, particularly in the special effects department. They make the bold choice to keep this character accurate to the source material material in regards to his size. He's about the height of a toddler, which I guess is what you would expect for a real life Mickey Mouse. And while I admire them for making that decision, because that's definitely a lot harder to pull off than just having an adult sized man run around killing people in a mouse costume, it was very clear that they didn't have nearly the amount of budget needed to actually pull this off without it looking completely laughable. They implement a couple of techniques in order to pull this off to the best of their capabilities. A lot of green screens being used in order to create the sizing differences between Willie and his environment, but he just looks really detached and separated from everything around him. And then when they're not using a green screen, for instance, on a lot of the scenes where he's attacking someone, they use a puppet, and none of it is done really well, and it's all very distracting. And so though I admire the bigger swing, in the end, it just made for a bigger miss. The poor effects actually ended up ruining quite a few of the kills as well, because there's so much bouncing back and forth between green screen Willie and puppet Willie that it takes you out of a lot of them. But really, I think most of the kills in this movie were pretty lackluster in general. I don't feel like they got as silly as they probably should have, and only a few kills in this movie really take advantage of the ridiculous nature of the film. If you're going to do a slasher that's zany and comical, then I feel at the very least most of your kills should bring that same energy. And with the exception of a couple, most of these kills just felt pretty simple and generic, and like ones that I've seen thousands of times in hundreds of other slasher movies. And that's unfortunate, because I thought that the kills would be something that this movie could deliver on, but in the end it ended up being just another thing that didn't work for me in this movie. Getting into the story now, and I know plot and narrative isn't exactly something you're looking for in a movie like this, as is the case with a lot of other slashers, but it is something I wanted to touch on just a little bit. I do appreciate the effort that was made to actually give us some background and lore with the Steamboat Willie character, because that's a lot more than can be said for a lot of the other movies that have been made like this. But outside of that, it hits a lot of the same familiar beats as a Friday the 13th Jason Takes Manhattan, which I actually had a sneaky suspicion might happen going into this film. And the ending of this movie flat out rips off another Friday the 13th movie. I won't say which one because of spoilers, of course, but once I realized the direction they were going, it got literal groans out of me. Obviously, I had a lot of issues with this movie, but nothing in this movie bothered me more than the humor. The humor in this movie is absolute dog shit. I'm sorry, mouse shit. All of the humor in this movie, and I mean all of it, is so juvenile and low-hanging fruit that having to sit through it for the entire runtime of this movie got me to the point of physical sickness. So many of the jokes in this movie, too many of the jokes in this movie, are either in reference to Disney or at the expense of Disney. And maybe the first couple were funny enough, but it wears thin very fast. And despite the well running dry, they continue to pull and pull and pull from it. And with each additional joke that got made, the further I could feel my eyes rolling into the back of my skull. In my written out list of criticisms for Screamboat, the point about the humor is the one that's in big bold letters. It is painfully annoying, and really it stops me from even being capable of enjoying any other aspect of the film. It is by far some of the worst comedy in a horror or slasher movie I have ever experienced. There you guys have it. Those are all my thoughts on Screamboat. And so yes, as of today and as of right now, even as a massive slasher fan, these are just not the movies for me. But I am confident that one day we will get one of these copyright exploitation slasher movies that I actually do enjoy. But that day, unfortunately, is just not today. I'm sure people who like this movie and see this video will tell me that I'm being way too harsh on it and that it's supposed to be bad and trashy and that's the whole point. And I'm totally aware of that. I don't think the filmmakers are blind as to what kind of movie they're making. They're definitely trying to get that so bad it's good reception. But for me, there is a thin line between so bad it's good and just being flat out annoying. And for me, Screamboat falls firmly in the latter. For the score here, I'm giving Screamboat a 3 out of 10. It really didn't do anything that I enjoyed. It pretty much has all of the worst qualities that a B-movie slasher can contain without having any of the redeeming ones. It's got a familiar plot, bland survivors, a poorly executed killer, and absolutely dreadful one-note humor. So yes, unfortunately for Screamboat and Steamboat Willie, it's a no for me, Mouse. But what are your all's thoughts on Screamboat and these copyright exploitation slasher films? Do you find them entertaining? Do you detest their existence? Or are you like me and you're just waiting for the one that comes along that you can actually connect with? Get down in the comments and let me know all your guys' thoughts. Also, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel as well for more movie reviews. And I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.